Today is the 11-year anniversary of one of my favorite players winning the MVP.
Who?
Derrick Rose?
Yes, sir.
Nice. Nice.
There you go.
D
I
Rose.
like that. Little D Rose.
11 years ago.
What a legend, man. D Rose
Love.
D Rose actually had like one of the most interesting careers. Like, unfortunately, one of the most interesting careers. Like, the youngest guy to ever win an MVP, and then, unfortunately, because he could jump out of the gym, the thing that made him so great ended up harming him. I feel like there's like a Spider-Man or a Batman or a Superman quote in there. Chris, can you tell me if I'm wrong? I feel like there's a Dark Knight quote in there. Isn't it what happens at the end of the Dark Knight? You either live long enough.
Great responsibility comes great power.
It's like
you live long enough.
That's Spider-Man, but it's like you either what is it? You either live long enough to see your
hero,
die a
or
hero,
live long enough to see yourself become a villain. But that doesn't apply.
Somewhere
he wasn't a villain.
But you know what I mean? Like, it was to the sense where it was like the thing that made him so great is what kind of hurt him in the end. His explosiveness, his ability to jump out of the gym.
Yeah.
So shout out to Derrick Rose, and I've seen comparisons in terms of the situation that happened with Derrick Rose that really kind of ended his knees careers with the Embiid thing. I didn't know this about Derrick Rose, but when it happened, when that major injury happened to his knees, he really shouldn't have been in the game. Is that correct, Sivash? Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was fourth quarter and they were up by 30, but Tom Thibodeau still kept him in the game. And then they went on to lose that series to the Sixers.
And ironically, I'm mentioning Joel Embiid. There's conversation about him being in, when he really didn't need to be, the orbital bone, the concussion, how that affects Philadelphia's series going forward. So shout out to Derrick Rose and, well wishes to Joel Embiid. But let's bring it into another episode of the Lob It Up Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Tobias. I got Chris and Sivash with me. Boys, we're back for another late night edition. And I remember the last time that we did a late night edition, it was like Lob It Up after dark. And there was a lot of maybe risque things that were said. So let's maybe try to keep it PG, at least PG-13 today. But Chris, I'll start with you. How you doing today, man?
Lame. I'm not too bad, boys. Doing pretty good. Obviously, lots gone on in the world of basketball since we last recorded. Unfortunately, my boys are out now. So a little sad to see them go, but it was still a great series. Great series.
Yeah. Before you go on, Sivash, like a great thing to take away, and we can touch on it, as we kind of recap the first round and then talk about the second round, even though it's already started. We're currently watching the Golden State Memphis game 2 right now, in the fourth quarter. But, one thing you can definitely take away from the Raptors season, but especially the Raptors in the playoffs, is they're kind of like a tweener team. They have experience and they have a lot of youth, which is just positive for them going in the future. You're able to get 6 games in the playoffs. That was more experience for some young guys that might not have had that experience. Steve Ash, how are you doing today, my man?
I'm doing all right, man. Dealing with a bit of allergies. I got a chance to see Chris on the weekend, but even at the mirror of visiting him, I have got my allergies acting up.
Brutal.
So I've been in bed all day, and if you see the amount of tissues I've used all day, you would think this is a house full of high school boys. But I am doing a lot better, and I'm here to talk. You might not see the excitement, but I'm excited to talk about basketball right now.
Yeah. Now, are you sure it wasn't the cats? Because I know you have this ongoing feud with Chris's 2 cats as well. You sure the cats didn't maybe play a little bit of a part there?
Yeah, I think they left some evidence on Chris's attire, and that's where it got my allergies acting up. Shout out Alan. Is your cat named Alan?
Alan, it's actually Al, but it's okay. It's close. It's close. Alan the cat. We do love a good pet with a good boring human name.
For sure.
So
Paul.
For sure.
Hector.
What was your other cat's name?
Ed.
Also
nice.
Another
Those are good names.
Plain, simple name. How do we want to start this? Do we want to give a take of the week? I'll be honest with you. I'll think of one as you guys are speaking. But we can start with a take of the week. or we can just get right into maybe a recap of the first round that was.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I do not have a take of the week with me.
Okay.
I think we should maybe get started with the recap of the first round, and then we can get to that if there is any takes of the week.
For sure.
Beauty.
Okay, so I guess we will start. Where do you guys want to start? You want to start in the East or in the West? Would you kind of give a quick run
My
through?
team got eliminated.
Let's do a quick run through. We can start in the East. So let's start with that first matchup. The Miami Heat versus the Atlanta Hawks. I know we talked about some lack of production from some of the guys there. But what was kind of your takeaways, Chris? First of all, I'll start with you. Basically on the Heat, how they performed, how that's going to affect them moving forward, and what the Atlanta Hawks need to do, to actually have a competitive playoff run next year.
Well, as far as like watching like the Heat there play, the Heat played like extremely well. They essentially blew out the Hawks there without two of their main backcourt guys for a couple of games there, and it was just, what can the Hawks do? You're relying on that man Trae Young, and he just was not producing. And I think just again, kind of like similar to like Toronto, like the Heat, it just has bodies that they can just kind of throw around, and every player can do something and they can perform. Whereas the Hawks, you kind of get stagnant if Trae Young isn't performing. So I think the Heat just going down the line, they're gonna have a good time. I think they're probably, again, not getting too much into the next round predictions, but
yeah,
Heat will play well against their matchup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Heat do play. We talked about them off the top. They do play the Philadelphia 76ers in the next matchup, and we'll give our predictions here a little later on in the episode. But that can be a competitive series for them if the big man that we were talking about is available. Siavash, what are your thoughts? What were your takeaways from the Atlanta Hawks and Miami Heat series?
A lot of what Chris mentioned. One of my biggest takeaways from this series was how Trae Young was being guarded and how much that bothered him and the Atlanta Hawks offense.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just excited to see what they're going to do next season and how they're going to bring in more options for Trae Young.
For sure. Now, with, we talk about guys like LeBron or Ben Simmons and surrounding them with shooters. Trae Young's obviously the focal point of that team. What do you think the Atlanta Hawks need to do to surround, what piece do you think that the Atlanta Hawks need to surround Trae Young with next season?
I think they definitely need to bring in more defensive, perimeter defensive players when it comes to it, because everybody on that defense was getting haunted.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of talks going on. We're going to get to another team that did get eliminated, but they need to bring in more defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Just defense would also help them, I think, in consistency. I think if you take some expectations or a role off of Trae Young and just allow him to focus on being a point scorer and a facilitator, maybe that, takes the pressure off him. Maybe he won't shoot 8% in the first game of the playoffs. We saw how impressive he was last year in the playoffs. He's the king of New York, right? People boo Trae Young at Yankees games. So he definitely has a hold on that, the city of New York and the New York fan base. Okay, we'll move on to the second matchup, a matchup that was going on today. One of the teams we're playing today, the Boston Celtics versus the Brooklyn Nets. This was a sweep.
Whoa.
None of us had a sweep. I think there was only maybe one or two sweeps predicted in the whole first round, but none of them was in this series. So, Steve Ash, I'll start with you this time. Boston and Brooklyn. What was your takeaways from that series?
I was just about ready to lob it back up to Chris because he had the Nets winning in 7.
That's true.
I did.
And that was an interesting part. But I think that's just a great situation to show you how one team does so great and then the other team is failing so bad that it's just coming together. It was an easy sweep. I think there was a lot of things going on. KD being shut down. Kyrie shutting it down after game 2, in my opinion.
Okay, wow.
When I talked to you guys about it, I did not think he was going to come out in game 4 because he did not want to go back to Boston again.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's a lot of pieces around the those two guys that just weren't performing either, and they got to reevaluate the roster. But for this series, they were definitely outmatched. That was definitely the worst matchup they could have gone against.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Chris, I'll ask you the same question I asked Steve Ash in the first round. What do you think Brooklyn needs to do next year to surround, Kevin Durant or just this team in general, with success to win?
I mean, it's like they have good pieces as it is now, but I think it's just finding a way to get these pieces to cohesively work together to actually become kind of like a team. Again, my Game 7 pick really depended on Ben Simmons coming back, because I thought Ben Simmons could have been that X factor. Obviously, the guy still has some stuff going on between the ears, a little bit of mental stuff that's now transitioning and manifesting itself into physical pain, I guess. So hopefully he can deal with that in the off season, fix that, and gets added into the rotation. So maybe it takes a little bit of that burden off of Kyrie, opens up some more spacing for Kevin to shoot and do his thing, because all series Tatum had him locked up, and there was literally nothing he could do.
Yeah.
So, and with Kevin and Kyrie being the only people kind of producing most nights, it's easy. Who are you gonna match up with?
Yeah,
well, I'm gonna just guard him, shut him down.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that you brought up the Ben Simmons thing. I'd like to ask both of you, do you think Ben Simmons, there was hopefulness that he was going to come back to the playoffs, whether it was game 1 or game 2, and then it was pushed back, and then inevitably he didn't come. And of course, the troll reporters online were, after Brooklyn had been swept, they were like, Ben Simmons announces he's ready to come back for game 5. Well, obviously they were swept, so he was not right. Do you think that might harm something in the locker room? Do you think that might affect some of the chemistry? This guy's just traded there in March or late February and never even laced up for them, was expected to lace up in the playoffs and then didn't. Do you think that might affect some of the chemistry? No?
I don't think so.
No.
Especially not from that. If there is issues before that, like him lying or him just backing out,
sure,
for a better use of word, like if he backed out of that situation, that's different. But from these reports or just in general about what rumors are going around, I don't think so.
Yeah,
exactly. Because if the Brooklyn Nets could have already worked through Kyrie not playing half of the season and all of that kind of going on and all of that, friction between him, Harden, and stuff, what Simmons did is basically nothing. It's just water off a duck's back at this point. They're like, you know what? It's whatever. They probably didn't even expect the guy to even lace up. Obviously, every team is going to report that we're going to want our superstars to lace up, but realistically, they probably knew he wasn't coming back till next year. So
now we'll probably get into this a bit later in a segment that I have for you guys, but I'd like to know, right before we move on to this next series, when we talk about the Greek Freak, Steve Ash, do you think Steve Nash returns as the head coach next year?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I don't think that's the move that they're going to make.
Okay.
If there's movement, I think it's going to be with the surrounding pieces. Maybe, again, if they want to really risk it, maybe there's some movement with Ben Simmons, but I do not think that the coaching is going to be, there's going to be any movement there.
Okay, cool. We'll get into that Ben Simmons possible move a bit later, but let's talk about the Greek Freak, who is another guy that obviously played today. They were playing against Boston. But the first series, and Sivash, I'll let you start. This is your team, the Bucks versus the Bulls. I'll be honest with you. I placed a 3-leg parlay series betting, having the Pelicans, the Mavericks, and the Bulls moving past the first round after I saw the Bulls' performance in game 2. However, Giannis, being Giannis, quickly shut a lot of people up, and they came out, they rolled the next 3 games. What was your takeaway from that series, and what do the Bulls need to do next season to have more success?
I think we definitely need another big in the rotation. Vucevic is just not a good match for that matchup. I genuinely think that matchup was probably the worst matchup we could have ran through.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I think we just need to come back healthy.
Would you have rather the Celtics? Like, I mean, obviously, you said that's the worst matchup, but if you had a choice between the Celtics, because they had the exact same record, right? Would you have rather the Celtics?
Of course. I mean, I would have maybe.
Yeah.
The defense is definitely a lot better than the Bucks, but maybe I would have taken that just because of the matchups that we had.
Mm-hmm.
Who on the Celtics is gonna body us to the basket the way Giannis does? Mm-hmm. Who creates as much of a threat on the inside? Tatum is a great inside threat, but I still would have wished someone else.
Yeah. Chris, what were your thoughts on that? I know Giannis is your guy. You're a big Giannis fan. How much did you watch of this series, and what was your takeaways from that series?
I didn't watch like these series like too much. Like I kind of started paying attention after like game 2, and I was like, oh, okay, this this could be a series after DeMar dropped his 42 points, something like that, or 41.
Yeah, he had a big second game.
But so I was like, okay, like we've got some competitive basketball. And then after like the third game, it was basically a 30-point blowout. I was like, yeah, no. I just kind of stopped because, like Siavash said, they didn't really have anybody that's going to step up to guard Giannis. Nobody's going to stop him. Mm-hmm. Watching him now in like these series, you can see like the Celtics are throwing 2-3 guys at this guy and clogging the lane so he can't drive to the basket and do his Greek freak stuff.
Yeah, he's definitely a machine, and like I think he's going to go down as one of the greatest. I mean, his resume is so impressive, and he's still under 30 years old, so incredibly impressive. But I'm going to come back to you here, Chris, and I want you to tell me about the 76ers and Raptors series. That was a very competitive series. We talked about it off the top. A lot of experience for this young team. But what did you see in this series? What were your takeaways in this series? And what do the Raptors need to do for next season for them to have a more competitive season?
Well, just watching these games, especially those like early few losses, a lot of that was, yes, I would say there was just some poor reffing. Some calls obviously weren't going the Raptors' way when they should have been, but a lot did fall back on the shoulders of the Raptors just making dumb mistakes. Nick Nurse not maybe calling some timeouts when he should. It's like, oh, okay, sick. Philly's gone on like a 12-0 run now. Are we going to call a timeout? No? Perfect. We'll just let them keep doing their thing type of stuff. And just, some of our top guys just not performing. Again, to be fair, Gary Trent was like sick.
Yeah.
You had like Fred get hurt kind of thing. But again, still shooting very low percentages. You had maybe some of the rookies getting up, the jitters and stuff, but then that kind of went away. So I just think they're just going to need a little more confidence in themselves like next year, as well as, just keeping that defensive like intensity from like tip off. Mm-hmm. You can't like pick it up at like, the end of the third, like now when you're trailing by like 18 type of thing. So
sure. Yeah. Steve Ash, what about yourself? What did you see from that series?
What I saw was the future is bright. Mm-hmm. I think that's the easiest way to put it. Even some guys like Precious Achua.
Mm-hmm. Oh, bro,
this
Precious
guy was balled
out. Mm-hmm. Balled out.
Yeah, it's looking good for them. In this series, I think one of the biggest takeaways is their defensive rotations. I think in Game 6, that was their biggest weakness. That was the place that made the biggest mistakes when Harden came out and they came out with a different game plan. They just couldn't perform, but for the most part, sure, they could have pulled that 3-0 comeback, but I don't think they should be disappointed.
No, definitely not. Probably one or two of my biggest takeaways. You mentioned one of them already, Chris, just Fred VanVleet and how productive, and I feel like how much more efficient they were without him. That's not to say that Fred's a bad player. We know Fred was an all-star. It was just you really saw the defensive aspect of their game, that kind of model that I think is kind of the Raptors style, that grit and grind sort of defensive style, switchability, improve when Fred was off the court. But the number one thing that I noticed, and I was kind of upset about, because I was a big fan of him. I had him as my most improved player of the year. I had some bets laid on him. It was when Scotty came back, OG really kind of said, okay, I'm gonna defer. You know what I mean? I'm gonna let these guys do a bit more, they can take on a bit more. And it's like, I would have liked to see OG continue the production and continue the aggressiveness that he was showing without Scotty, without Fred, and kind of consistently keep that up.
Before we move off that, I think that is one of the biggest takeaways from that series or the season is I don't think they have a go-to guy. Pascal could be the guy, but again, OG, whenever he was the guy, it did seem like they were doing good.
For sure.
I think they need a go-to guy.
Yeah. Okay, we'll slide over to the West and we'll start at the top again. The Suns and the Pelicans. It was actually pretty competitive, a lot more competitive than people thought. I'm pretty sure I picked a sweep with the Suns. But obviously D-Book went down, got injured, did eventually come back, but we really saw the Pelicans kind of show their youth as well. Speaking of the Raptors, we saw the Pelicans show their youth, show their tenacity, their grit and ability to, keep playing. Siavash, I'll throw it to you. What was your biggest takeaway from this series? And just, let us know your thoughts on the Pelicans in this first year since however long they've been in the playoffs.
I think very much similar to the Raptors. They just showed out how good they can be. Guys like Herbert Jones, Jose Alvarado, Brandon Ingram coming out. That was really like a good series for them. And to see them do that and the potential of who they can have on their team next season, I can definitely see them being a top 4 seed if the man Zion Williamson decides to come back. But otherwise, for Phoenix, I think there wasn't a lot of disappointment. Of course, D-Book going down was going to be a bit of a challenge, but they pushed through it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you mentioned the Pelicans possibly being a top 4 seed. I definitely see that as a possibility. The West, the East was very impressive. The East was very competitive this year. The West will be a conference to watch next year, as will the East, but the West will be a conference to watch next year. Of course, the Lakers are going to, try to make their way back to where they should be. The Clippers will have some guys coming back from injuries. How will the Grizzlies do? How will the Timberwolves do? You know what I mean? What's going to go on with Portland? Are they going to get rid of Dame? Are they going to get a piece in there? So it'll be very interesting to see how that West shapes up. The Nuggets, what happens with the Nuggets. So that'll be definitely interesting. But Chris, what were your thoughts on this Pelicans-Sun series? And what do the Pelicans need to do to make themselves more competitive and have a better season next year?
I agree with a lot of what C said. Watching them, they just did kind of show their age a little bit in regards to them how they played. I think they do have a great set of guys right there, and then just with that addition of Zion, again, it's just going to create more defensive pressure, more offensive looks, chances, things like that. So I honestly don't think they need to change too much coming next year.
So
maybe again just working its
So you think it'll be as easy as just sliding Zion into that 4, and then they can be okay, this is what we had this year. Zion's been with the team the whole time, so it's not like he's been away or anything. But you think it'll be just as easy as just kind of integrating him into the system?
I don't think it'll be just as easy.
Okay.
I think there will be a little bit of an adjustment period, but I think they definitely will get rolling a lot faster than people probably expect to get going into the season.
For sure.
Because like you said, Zion's been there the whole time. It's not like he's been away from the team.
Yeah.
So
I think, Chris, you had mentioned it in this conversation about the Pelicans, but going on to this 2-7 seed, what I saw was a lot of immaturity. And I honestly thought this series was just going to go to 7 because of the expression of emotions, which is a good thing. It's good to be passionate, but sometimes, you can't let your emotions dictate the style, the gameplay that you have. But Siavash, what did you see from this series? Grizzlies, Timberwolves, two of the youngest teams in the NBA.
I know Siege is head. He in Minnesota now. As soon as that's said, that's what's going through his head.
Oh, that's when I'm sitting here just giggling to myself. I just thought of a great saying, and I think might be able to explain this. It might not.
It's
might
not we in Minnesota now, is it?
No. To use what Tobe always has, coin coined as a term, dog. On one side, we had dogs. On one side, we had cats. Oh. I just thought it was immature, and it was just like two sides trying, like, different things. Like, we saw how Jaw reacted in those situations, and then we saw on the other side, they talked their shit, but then they lost the game every game.
Yeah.
So it definitely immaturity, and I think it was good for both sides. We're gonna see how they're gonna play next season.
Now, what do you guys think? Speaking of next season, what do you guys think the Timberwolves need to do next season? I just talked about how competitive that West is going to be. Who's going to be a top 4 seed? Who's going to be a play-in team? Who's going to slide in that 5-6? What do the Timberwolves need to do? Because, as Chris, you mentioned a couple times this season, there's a big 3 there. Sivash will always rebuttal with a medium 3. Medium 3. But what do you guys think that they need to do next season to maybe just avoid the play-in, or how can they grow up essentially next year?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
How can they grow up? It's just, again, you got the young core. They're doing their thing. Maybe it's just better managing emotions. So that way they are able to close out games. Because when they are, like you said, emotions great for the game, can swing the tide in either or direction for you. Unfortunately, it did seem like the emotions were swinging the tide in the opposite direction for Minnesota almost every time. You had Cat being somebody who he isn't, and often ended up looking stupid or dumb at the end of these games, because it's like, you're out here shit talking, you're doing these things that you don't normally do at all, and now your team just lost because you choked. So
and like you mentioned a bit of kind of leadership in general, and Sivash, I'll let you give your comments on this as well. And I know I'm pretty sure just signed a multi-year deal, and that's all nice and dandy, but a big standout for me was also the coaching. And it's like, with a young team like this, I almost wonder if a veteran coach is more suitable in a team like this, to kind of show them how to act, but more importantly, take a time out when they're losing, on a 20-point run. But Sivash, what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, they're not going to fire Chris Finch, just after year 1. But what are your thoughts on, again, how they can mature next season, and maybe your take on Chris Finch as the coach and some of his blunders in the playoffs?
I think Chris Finch, I think we just got to look at it from the Minnesota's perspective. They just made the playoffs after a few years ago. Like, I think it was 2017 they made it with Jimmy. Yeah. But before that, it had been like over 10 years before they made it. So for them, I'm sure this is a great success, even though they lost in 6. I think they're going to run it back the same. But if I am anybody who cares about Minnesota Timberwolves, I would definitely want them to rebuild around Cat and Anthony Edwards.
Okay.
That's the pieces. D'Lo was real quiet during that series. So
very inconsistent. D'Lo.
Yeah, so they got to start looking into what they want to surround those guys with. And again, credit to Pat Bev. I think he did have an effect on them, and keeping a guy like that around is going to be helpful.
Okay, so we just talked about Memphis, and we're gonna talk about the Warriors. But before I mention that, we're watching this Memphis and Golden State Warriors game live. It is in the fourth. It is in the fourth quarter. I think there's like 2 minutes left. They're doing a highlight reel, so I'm just trying to pass time until I see the score. But it's 132 on my clock, 199 for the Memphis Grizzlies, with the Golden State Warriors in possession. So speaking about the Golden State Warriors, we have the Golden State Warriors versus Nuggets series, and I believe we all took the Nuggets, with one caveat that I had to explain to multiple people in my TikTok comments.
Oh my God.
We made these picks before we knew of, Steph Curry coming back. We made these picks before we knew when Luke was coming back, which is why I had the Jazz. I think one of you also had the Jazz. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure you had the Mavs, right, Chris?
I had the Mavs. I'm pretty sure.
I had the Mavs too.
Oh, well, I guess I was the only person that had the Jazz.
I believe in Luka Doncic.
You know what I mean? So those picks were made before we knew about Steph, and Steph really showed out. Of course, you got to give your flowers to Jordan Poole as well, but Jordan Poole had some off games at the end there, but Steph was pretty consistent his whole way. So, what were your takeaways, Chris, from that that Warriors versus Nuggets series, and tell us about how impressive Jokic was, even though they didn't win the series.
Bro, Jokic. Sorry. Draymond just being fucking Draymond, and he might have fucked up for the Warriors. But anyways, super impressed with Jokic, and just this guy getting constantly hacked, hit, doing his thing, whatever. Anytime he's trying to play, still not complaining, going up, getting bored. So Joel Embiid, take some notes for next year. That's how you become a center that leads your fucking team, brother. But again, super impressed with how they did. They managed to sneak out one win, right? One dub.
Yeah.
Which, gentleman's sweep. But again, a lot of this stuff depended on if Steph was coming back. With Steph coming back, it's just too much to guard, too much to work with, and him being Jokic.
Yeah,
that's all you can really expect from the guy.
And you mentioned, that they got one win, and that was off of a Steph, Clay, and maybe not Jordan Poole, but definitely a Steph and Clay poor shooting night, and the Denver Nuggets literally doing everything right, and they were able to squeeze out that win. So I also want to give some flowers to Aaron Gordon. I was also very impressed by him in that first round. I think one or two of the games he wasn't doing as well, but just even the fact of him going at Draymond, like that's a task in itself. I want to give him flowers for sure. Now you just imagine, that team, add Jamal and add MPJ. So that'll be definitely impressive. But Sivash, let me know what your thoughts were on that series. And, same question I asked Chris about the Pelicans with Zion. Is it as easy as just integrating those two next year, or do they need to do something else to make themselves a more competitive team next year?
Well, I don't think it's a problem at all in bringing those two guys back, because they've already played with Jokic. They've already been part of the system. Sorry, I'm just constantly looking at the score here.
I know.
49 seconds, 102.99.
They got 2 buckets. They got 3 throws. So
I'm looking at the play-by-play, so I'm ahead of you guys. I don't want to spoil anything now.
Yeah, I'm at 40 seconds.
To keep it on the conversation. To keep it on conversation. I think those guys are going to be back, and it's not going to be a problem at all. And Jokic, we saw him play his mind out of his mind this series. So anybody that had any doubts about Jokic being the MVP, they just got to watch that playoff series and see how much he was carrying.
100%. Although MVP doesn't incorporate the playoffs, I definitely agree that just kind of extended, the proof for people to see how great of a player he is, and how much he deserves that award. Final series of the West, final series of the first round, Dallas versus Utah. This is actually a very interesting series. A lot of back and forth. But, like I said to one of my buddies in our sports betting group chat, the Dallas Mavericks were down, I think, by 20 at the half. He was pretty pissed off because I told him, just bet on Dallas. And I'm like, brother, trust me. I'm like, basketball is a game of runs, and they're playing against the one team in the league that suffers the worst back half of games. They cannot hold on to leads. But Chris, what were your thoughts in this series? And how impressive was Luka Doncic in your opinion, watching him this year?
Man, Luka, fucking lights out, brother. I love watching this guy come back and just basically have his way with the Jazz and just essentially making them implode. Because you had Donovan Mitchell, you had Rudy Gobert, they're both quiet too.
Yeah.
You didn't. I mean, I'm not gonna say quiet. Rudy was still giving you double doubles and stuff like that, but it's hard. How are you gonna guard a big guard like Luke? I think even at one point he went at Rudy, hit him with a couple pump fakes still, and he's just like, "You can't guard me. This guy can't guard me." And it's just I loved it. Absolutely loved seeing that.
Yeah.
So I think Utah's gonna have to shake some shit up. And somebody's out of there next year.
Definitely. And we'll get to that in a segment that I'll bring to you guys here in a bit. Just about a bunch of potential moves in the offseason and the start of next year. But Siavash, I want to hear from you without giving too much away. So we keep the segment as the segment. But what do the Utah Jazz need? It feels like this is a conversation that happens every year. We don't even talk about the Utah Jazz. But what do the Utah Jazz need to do to make themselves a competitive team next year? We've seen this pretty much this same squad be a number one seed in the West. You know, we've seen them have a competitive team, have consistent wins in the regular season. But as everybody knows, the regular season is not the playoffs. So what does the Utah Jazz need to do to make themselves a competitive team in the playoffs?
I do not have an answer. I have no idea what they have to do.
I was going to say, if you did, Danny Ainge might be calling your phone.
Yeah.
Well, he would just have to listen to this episode and then he would have to answer. We can then bill him out for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, to be honest. There's a lot of flaws going on with that team. The biggest one I think that was displayed this series was Donovan Mitchell's defense. That's not being talked about enough, I think. Just seeing him get hunted on every pick and roll, it was disgusting. It was, I'm not going to say the analogy that came to my mind for that, but yeah, it was not looking good for him. Mm-hmm. So I think defense is definitely going to be a emphasis point for them. Weird to say with Rudy Gobert on that team, but we're going to get to that different point of the podcast, I guess. But yeah, I think it was just it was more of a failure by Utah than it was a success by Dallas.
John Morant's got 45 points. Sorry.
Yeah.
I am so sorry.
I have actually a stat that I'd like to bring. Shout out to Woj retweeted this from Ohim. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. But John Morant joins LeBron James and Kobe Bryant as the only players with multiple 45-point games in the playoffs before turning 23 years old. So shout out to Ja. That's very impressive. Very impressive.
That's my rookie of the year right there.
Yeah. I also, again, I missed the back half of the game, but I also have some buddies messaging me saying Grizzlies were handed the game by the refs. So I don't know what happened. Of course, there's always going to be the refs did this, the refs did that, especially when you have money on the line. But if I could ask you guys one more question before we go on to our round two predictions, even though the round two's already started, you know, we'll just give our predictions that we had made off the top. If you had to take the whole first round of the playoffs this year, what was your favorite moment, or what was your most surprising moment? What was the one moment that stuck out to you and you're like, fuck, I love the NBA playoffs? What was that one moment that, you know, you could point to in 5 years and be like, this happened in the 2022 playoffs, and it was my favorite? I'll give you guys, you know, a bit of time to think. We had a lot of moments. You know, we had, of course, like we've mentioned, the Ja and Ant series going back and forth, very impressive. Mm-hmm. Golden State just, you know, returning to form as they usually do. Milwaukee kind of having their way with the Bulls after game two. But what sticks out to you guys? What's the most impressive to you, or surprising, or whatever adjective you want to use? I'll toss it to anybody, whoever has the first idea.
I got you. I'm going to go with the Warriors and Nuggets series, and I'm going to call this the Jordan Poole coming out party. Mm-hmm. I think he had an impressive start. I mean, even this game, he had 20 points. So for this guy to come out and do this, he's definitely going to be a great player for years to come.
Mm-hmm. I just want you to know I did not ugh your take. I ugged because I remembered seeing what they were fucking calling Jordan Poole. Like, they're like, oh, it's the Splash Bros and the new swimming pool. How are you going to name the man the new swimming pool? That is literally the worst fucking nickname I have ever heard in my life.
That's so dumb.
Like, that's so dust.
People try so hard to create these nicknames, and again, it's like, yo, it's the Splash Brothers. You can call them the Splash Triplets, or hey, don't make up a name. It's okay. Yeah. Things will be all right.
Wait,
don't make up a name.
The greatest nickname that came
you're
out
not
of this
going with the PTSD
playoffs?
one.
No. It's not Nuggets.
Okay.
It's not the Warriors related. The best nickname that came out of these playoffs, I guess, season is Grand Theft Alvarado.
Yeah.
I love that.
Grand Theft Alvarado. Wait.
It's
Oh,
the
it was
best
just
one.
for him. Yeah. True. I like that. Yeah, I like that. And I also saw the clip that you sent us, because obviously we talked about the can he shoot? Yes, I can shoot clip, but that it was extended, and he's like,
love
I'm the
it.
light skinned Pat Bev, so that was kind of funny. He's like, I'm better. I don't know if you guys caught that at the end. He's like, I'm light skinned Pat Bev. I'm better. But Chris, what about you? What was that one moment that kind of stands out to you in these first round of the 2022 playoffs?
I'm gonna have to say I'm gonna have to first give out an apology for some Chris Paul slander that I had. Although I do think he did do what I said he needed to do. He went out there, he faced his demons in that ref. What's his name?
Scott Foster.
Scott Foster.
Yeah. Guy shot what, 14 for 14 that night?
At least so.
Set a record.
Yeah.
Set a record.
Shout out.
So now I can look at Scott Foster in his face and say,
Can do it in LA. Thanks a lot, Chris.
So that was actually surprising to see that, and it was actually a really cool thing to watch too as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now we will stay in that West, and we'll stay with Chris Paul. We'll stay with the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns are playing the Dallas Mavericks in the second round. I almost said the first round. In the second round of the NBA playoffs this year. I'm just going to pull up our predictions here, but Sivash, do you want to start us off
It
with?
was still valid?
Yeah, of course. We can't change it.
Yeah, you can't change it.
Yeah, that's so like
Yeah.
that's so
Come on, brother.
dust. Sivash, yours
Oh,
is the
look at you
first. If
guys.
you go to the Lob It Up podcast, Lob It Up Pod on Instagram, you'll see Sivash is the first pick that's on the screen. So you have the Phoenix Suns in 6. Give us your breakdown.
Yeah, I think this is one of those series where we're going to see that everything that Dallas does, the Suns are going to do better. I think defensively, Dallas has been a great fourth quarter team since the middle of the season, but Phoenix has been that since the beginning of the season. Dallas has a great playmaker and offensive coordinator in Luka Doncic. You got the point guard on the other team. Dallas has great spacing, and so does the Suns, and they got a great center to counter that as well. I think everything you can see with what Dallas can do, the Suns can do it better. And of course, they do have all these different pieces like Mikal Bridges, like Cam Johnson, like DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker, and Chris Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. You all right over there?
Chris is dying over there.
Bro, it felt like my rib cage was gonna fucking explode like
Don't
little
do that.
xenomorphs in it.
Don't do that.
Oh,
Sneeze.
don't die on the podcast, bro.
I know, right?
I feel like that's like a liability. We might have to be like,
we don't have insurance.
sued or something for that.
By him?
It's somebody, well, not by him, he'd be dead. But I totally agree with everything that you said, Siavash. That's honestly why I picked the Phoenix Suns. I also picked them in 6. You got Chris Paul, you got the versatility, you got the depth. I would almost argue that Dallas has more depth. But what a big piece that stuck out to me was the coach. All respects to Jason Kidd. Not taking anything away from him. Bless you as well. Is your rib cage all right?
Yeah.
No, I'm about to die.
Okay, great. It'll be a solo show here, folks. But it's Monty Williams, man. He, Sivash, I believe he was your coach of the year pick. Super impressive. And when it comes to the playoffs, especially when it comes deeper into the playoffs, it's about experience. And it's about, the chess match, strategies and, matchups, lineups. So I'm not saying that Jason Kidd doesn't have that. Obviously, he's a former NBA player. Just with the experience that the Phoenix Suns got last year. That I go back to that clip of Devin Booker standing there watching the confetti fall and the Milwaukee Bucks raising the NBA trophy. And he just goes, damn, like they're hungry for it. You know what I mean? Chris Paul is probably the hungriest man in the league for the Larry O.B. So, that's why I took the Phoenix Suns. But there's someone on the podcast that did not take the Phoenix Suns. And this was very shocking to me. And I remember messaging you. I was away for the Bachelor weekend whenever you had, you had sent it to me. And I messaged him. He said, Mavs in 7. And I said, wow, you are crazy. I love it. Spicy C instead of spicy P. He said, I'm choosing chaos. Now, tell us why. Tell us why you chose the Mavs over the Suns.
Literally, no rhyme, no reason. And who can we trust, brother?
Wow.
That is, like I said, I am choosing pure chaos. And I'm just gonna trust my gut. My gut says Mavs in 7.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna listen to my gut.
Wow.
Now maybe I'll end up with a little bit of indigestion, or maybe it's just some gas or something, and it's then gonna be a Phoenix in 6. But who knows? But for now, the gut says Mavs in 7.
Well, that's probably why when you sneezed, you had all that, stuff trying to come out of your chest. It was the Dallas Mavericks pick, but that's fair. I mean, Luka Doncic is one of those guys. I don't think he's on Giannis's level. I'm not saying that, but he's definitely one of those guys that can take over a series. We haven't seen it. He hasn't been able to get out of the first round for the past 2 years, but he did it this year. He got over the Utah Jazz, and I have seen other people also picking the Mavs, so I'm not throwing it out as something that won't happen. I definitely think that a lot of people, no one has this as a sweep. A lot of people are giving the respect to Dallas, and so we'll have to wait and see. But that will be an exciting matchup, just seeing Devin Booker and Luka Doncic going back and forth. Okay, now moving down to the other series in the West. It's kind of that veteran team that we've been here before. We're experienced. They've got Steph, they got Clay, they got Draymond, Iggy on the bench, Steve Kerr behind the bench, and then they're facing that immature team that we were talking about. That team that had a great season, very young, one of the youngest teams in the league, got some things to tweak. So, Chris, I'll start with you this time. You had the Memphis Grizzlies, and you had them in 7. So again, another upset, as you call it. Let us know what your breakdown is here.
Man, it's just these young guys on the Grizzlies and how physical they are. Even just watching like the first 8 minutes of this game or whatever, it's like Minnesota went on like I think it was like a 10-0 run just to start the game, type of thing.
That's true.
And again, it's just physical. Because who was it? Was it Brooks ejected after 3 minutes?
Yep.
You got Draymond doing Draymond stuff, so it's really nice to see that like level of defense. You got Jaren Jackson Jr. shooting out of his mind. He was a little quieter tonight, but even still, he's getting the points, doing what he has to do, and people are just stretching the floor. Whereas like you have the Warriors, great guys. Obviously, I'm not looking to Draymond to score. You just pretty much have to contain like Curry, Thompson, and like Poole essentially. And Wiggins here and there, but
yeah, I mean, shout out to Ja in that game that we just watched. That game 2, he had, like we had mentioned, 45, 2 45-point games under 23. He dropped 47, 8 and 8 tonight. But one player on that Grizzlies team that I think is very important for the success of the Grizzlies, and he didn't do well tonight. It's not Jaren Jackson Jr., as you mentioned. It's Desmond Bane. He did not have a good night.
No.
They did get the win, so that's great. But 5 points, 6 rebounds, which is great, but he didn't even shoot the ball that much. He shot 2 for 7 when it was 1 for 4 from 3. But I can respect that. I can see the Grizzlies moving on. It's just watching Golden State in that first series, I was super impressed. It's again one of those points where you watch Steph, and for a long time I was a Steph hater. Not a Steph hater, I just didn't like Steph. Because we would always go against him, the Clippers would always go against him. I'm like, man, fuck this guy. Like, this fucking babyface guy always fucking kills us. Like, he's shooting from, like, half court. Like, what the hell is this bullshit? But I know as he's gotten older and as I've seen him a bit more, and I think especially what did it for me was last year. And seeing him really kind of take the reins, being by himself and being as impressive. I was like, holy fuck, this guy's actually really good. And you watch him and you can't help but laugh. You're just like, this guy is amazing. So, Steve Ash, give us your breakdown and why you took the Golden State Warriors to win in 6.
I think a lot of what Chris has mentioned is valid. But for me personally, I just have a difficult time seeing that Warriors team lose. Tonight, what we saw was the Grizzlies putting in a decent effort. Ja, of course, going crazy. Desmond Bane, I think the reason he wasn't doing so well, just from glancing at the game here and there, was because Ja was doing so great that he just kind of let him cook. But for the most part, even with all that, the Warriors lost by 5 points.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where the point differential, you got to look at it and see how, even last game, the Grizzlies, Jaren Jackson Jr., as Chris mentioned, went nuclear. And of course, the Warriors
won by 1 point.
Yeah, with no Draymond.
But
which
even
is,
that,
yeah, go ahead.
But even that was the end of the game where there was just a few things going on. I will mention Clay missing 2 free throws. At the end of this game, I was just watching the game log. He had to travel. Klay Thompson I don't know what's going on with him.
Well,
the past 2 games.
I'm looking at him right now. 5 of 19, 2 for 12 from 3. So not super impressive. And if you want to know someone that's more upset than anybody about Klay Thompson missing those 2 free throws, I had a buddy that had Golden State Warriors to win by 2. What it was on the spread at 1.5, and they won by 1. He was pissed. That's all he needed. I think it was like $8 for like $450. He was very upset. But
That's
yeah, I mean the reason I was high on the Golden, just talking about the game tonight, the reason I was high on the Golden State Warriors to win tonight was, like you mentioned, they won last game and they didn't have Draymond. They didn't have the best shooting. Triple J went nuclear. And, I want to ask you guys this. I'm looking at the starters. Klay Thompson played 41 minutes. Steph Curry played 39 minutes. Andrew Wiggins played 38. Draymond played 32. Gary Payton played 3. Now, this is the second game in this series that we've seen someone get ejected from the game early on.
To be fair, Gary Payton got hurt, wasn't it?
Yeah,
but off of the Dylan Brooks ejection.
Yeah.
Brandon Clark didn't get injured. Yeah, Brandon Clark didn't get injured, thankfully. But just in general, like, what do you guys, what's your thoughts on that? And do you think that this is going to continue? It just seems like a very physical matchup.
Oh, yeah. I guarantee you this is going to continue. I would not be surprised if Draymond doesn't get ejected again at like some point. And if another Memphis player gets ejected too. Like, I could even see Ja being ejected because he gets again so emotional. Technical, boom, boom, you're gone. And these ejections really are swinging things in some teams' favor. Like, it did hurt Memphis to lose Brooks, but I don't know, maybe it gave Ja the room to go nuclear like he did today.
Yeah.
And then the last game, losing Draymond didn't really affect them, but like, maybe they would have won more than by 1 point.
For sure. Yeah.
Know.
Stephen A. Smith talked on his show with Kendrick Perkins. I can't remember the exact number, but his point was that Kendrick Perkins was in the top 10 all time of technical fouls and ejections. But Draymond is on that top 10 for both regular season and playoffs. The question I want to ask you, I almost called you Draymond. The question I want to ask you, Siavash, is do you think if
so disrespectful.
to who?
To me.
The thing I want to ask you is, obviously, like I mentioned, Gary Payton only played 3 minutes. Do you think, and they lost by 5, do you think if Gary Payton played the whole game, do you think that this would be a different outcome? Just because he's shown a great improve in the defensive aspect during the playoffs so far.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great defender. Not even because of his father and all that, but because of just how involved he's on defense. If you watch the game, you can see this guy is really making an impact.
Yeah.
So having him out of that lineup, it kind of creates a weird situation for the Warriors.
For sure.
I mean, I was watching the game. There was moments I'm like, these guys just seem like they're just putting it together on the spot. It just doesn't feel like as planned as it should have been. And I think that injury did affect them a little bit. But for the most part, I mean, the 6 games is still valid to me because the Warriors just won 1 game at Memphis. So that kind of gives them an advantage. Now Memphis has lost that home court advantage, and we're going to see how they're going to play in Golden State.
Now I have Golden State in 5. Again, I'm still super impressed by them. Do I think it might go a bit longer? Possibly. I'm still going to rock with Golden State in 5. They're just an experienced team, and I think, especially the later you get on in the playoffs, experience trumps all. So that's why I have the Golden State Warriors in 5. But let's slide over to the East, and I'll start with you, Chris. The Miami Heat versus 76ers series. And this is the only series that we were all in agreement. Wow, I just said it again. Last episode I said agreements. That's not even a word. It's either agreement or agreeance. The Miami Heat series is the only series that we're all in agreements with. Today I'll blame it on the tiredness, but I have no excuse any other time. Miami Heat, you got them in 5. Give us your breakdown.
Again, I think looking at the Miami Heat are a very similar team to like the Raptors, where it comes to like, they have all these like defensive schemes, offensive schemes, all these things that they can use to work like their advantage. I didn't know literally until actually even watching like the game, because I didn't get to catch like the whole Sixers game, so I just caught highlights. Didn't even occur to me that Joel wasn't playing. I didn't even see him. I didn't realize he actually had a broken face.
Yeah.
So he wasn't playing. I think that's going to be a huge factor for the 76ers not having him in there. Just because, you do have players like Bam, like down there, who are going to be able to, probably bully Tobias Harris like a little bit, or whoever you decide to shift down onto him. And then can't really read into this. I don't know. I think I saw a tweet earlier where it showed that like, Maxey was getting kind of pissed off with Harden.
I did see that.
Stuff like that. So I don't know what's going on there.
Now, one thing I will say is I often try not to read into bench skirmishes between teammates, because it happens all the time. We saw it with this Miami Heat team earlier this year. We talked about it. It was the Golden State Warriors. Their offense was literally upsetting Miami to the point that they were, almost fighting on, the sidelines. So I don't know. I think they'll probably figure it out. But it's probably, of concern for them moving forward, especially not having Joel. I believe he might come back for game 3, game 4. We'll see. But the last game was a 14-point deficit, so it was a big enough spread. Tobias Harris, our guy, like we were talking last episode, did his thing. 27 points, 6 rebounds. So shout out to him.
Second best Tobias I know.
Well, it's probably Tobias Fumke. Wow. Tobias Fumke. I'm probably third. But Siavash, go ahead, give us your breakdown. You also took Miami in 5. Do you think? I guess these predictions were done after Kyle Lowry being out was announced, but do you think that will affect the Miami Heat? Obviously, Joel is not there, but Kyle, it does have a positive impact on that team as a leader.
I don't know how out of touch I am, but I did not know Kyle was out.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I just found out from you. Thank you.
Breaking news.
I don't know. I don't know how this is going to affect it. I'll be honest. When we give out our predictions, I didn't know about Joel, and that's where I just looked at the roster and I was like, look, Harden is not the same Harden we've known him to be, so I don't think they're going to be able to pull this out. Kyle Lowry not being there definitely is going to affect it, but I still got Miami winning it. Maybe 6 games, but 5 is definitely doable.
So the thing I like about us kind of doing this late is we get, actual breaking news, not me breaking the news. Whenever, just speaking on Gary Payton from that last series, he's got a fractured left elbow. He'll have an MRI tomorrow. So by the time you're hearing this, he'll have already had that MRI. But that's very unfortunate, especially for the defensive aspect of the Golden State Warriors. Sticking with the Miami Heat, though, I took them in 6 again. We're all in agreement in this series. I like Miami. They're like you had mentioned. They're similar to Toronto. They have versatility. They can switch. I think Bam will be a major factor, and we saw that in Game 1. He dropped 24 and 12. And Bam hasn't been getting a lot of rebounds in the playoffs so far. But he'll definitely be collecting his boards with no Joel there for sure. So I don't think there's anything too much to weigh on that series, especially because we all agree. But let's go to one that when we talked about doing the predictions, and speaking about the predictions on the podcast, after the game one, I feel like Sivash, you wanted to change your prediction on this series. However, after tonight's game, you did pick Boston to win in 6. Are you sticking with that prediction? Boston in 6.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're mentioning about me wanting to change my prediction.
Okay.
I don't know if you have real hard evidence on that,
Yeah, probably dementia.
yeah, that's it. So I do still have Boston winning in 6. Game 1 was just a fascinating game. Boston shot 10 2-point field goals.
Yeah.
And it's just hilarious because I think that they would have tied the record if they had 9 with the 2017 Rockets, the team that lost to the Warriors.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, they just had a terrible game 1. Jaylen Brown was definitely a ghost.
Yeah, he was.
And this game, it did not feel good coming into it because there was a news that Marcus Smart was going to be out for that game. And I was definitely confident on the Bucks doing well, but the Celtics stuck to their guns and stuck to their strengths, and they made it difficult for Giannis and anybody else on that team to do anything they wanted. They went with the big size lineups that they had, and similar to how they played KD in the last series, they played Giannis. And he basically, I saw a play where Giannis tried to do a spin on Grant Williams. That man was not moving.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm very impressed with Jason Tatum, to be honest with it, with his defense and his ability to kind of hold down Giannis. In the first game, again, like you mentioned, it didn't look like he was doing that good of a job. I think he was going to take the same approach that he took with KD that he was taking on Giannis, and they're just, both great players, but Giannis is not the same build that KD is. But, it was considered kind of a blowout when we were watching that Milwaukee-Boston game. Milwaukee really kind of limited Boston, and that was a 12-point win. Tonight, the Boston Celtics beat the Miami. That's how tired you can tell I am. They beat the Milwaukee Bucks by 23 points. So again, you mentioned without Marcus Smart, and my thought was coming into this game when they announced Marcus Smart not being there, shit happens in the playoffs. We saw with Booker going out, right? We saw last year with Kawhi going out. If you're actually that team, if you're actually that competitive of a team, you think you're that good, then you need to face the adversity and, win without those guys. And they were able to do that, and they were able to do that with, passing that test of flying colors. Marcus Smart, winning Defensive Player of the Year, whether you agree with it or not, one of the league's best defenders. And they were still able to beat I just did it again. They were still able to beat the Milwaukee Bucks by over 20 points. So super impressive. In this series, I also had Boston in 6. I have Boston in the NBA Finals. That's my prediction. I have them coming out of the East. I'm super impressed by them. Even though they've been a pain in my chest the whole season, up and down, playing with my emotions like a roller coaster, I'm going to stick with the C's. And, again, after tonight, it just further, makes me more confident with that selection. However, I did say there was only one series that we all agreed on. And as much as I've said Miami in this Milwaukee and Boston series, Milwaukee is a selection of Chris. Chris, why do you have the Bucks? Are you riding with your guy Giannis? And what do you have them in? You have them in 6, right?
I have them in 6.
Milwaukee in 6. So break it down.
Pretty much like you said, it's like they're gonna, with Boston doing kind of the same thing that they were trying to do with the Brooklyn Nets and guarding, Giannis the way they guarded KD. KD and Giannis aren't the same animal, bro.
Yeah.
I must have missed that play where you said, Giannis tried to spin off Grant Williams and Grant Williams didn't move, because I saw 3 other plays where Giannis trained through the man and the man's looking up at him from his back. Pause. But unless they're throwing 2+ guys at Giannis, they're not stopping Giannis. It's just, you just need the other players basically to perform too as well. Bobby Portis, he played fairly well tonight. Obviously didn't help too that Brooke Lopez was very quiet as well. And also too, I think he got fouled out. Drew Holiday played well, not, but other than that, I guess you can really kind of see like they are missing like Chris Middleton like a little bit, who was that dedicated secondary scorer if Giannis couldn't, do his thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm banking it all basically on Giannis right now, and just I think it's gonna basically be who gets tired first. Is it Giannis? Is he gonna burn out first, or the Boston Celtics gonna burn out first, basically trying to guard him?
Yeah.
But I also will commend the Boston Celtics tonight for just their switches off the ball, just not giving up shots. Like, Tatum made a couple big threes by passing the ball off rather than, standing still and just staying there. Moved himself into an open position, was able to free up for a three. And for whatever reason, Milwaukee just was not closing out, just letting him shoot those open threes. And obviously he's hitting those shots.
Yeah. The Jason Tatum's quickly, again, I've already said it. I said it in 2 years. And then I think I said it a couple podcasts ago, a couple weeks ago. Jason Tatum's going to be a top 5 player in the league, without a doubt, at the start of next year.
It's gonna be?
Yeah, especially after I will say right now, but I don't know if y'all will flame me for that. But I mean, I think at the start of the season next year, if you're gonna list your top 5 players in the league, reflecting on the season that was this season and then the playoffs, however it turns out, you'll look at that guy and you'll say, he's pretty damn good. Because I don't think of JT
LeBron,
as a defender
AD.
like that. So I mean, you select your top 5. I mean, I'm not here to criticize you or anything. Okay, so that was the 4 matchups in
Russ.
the round. Yeah. Okay. In the round 2, I do have a little bit of a, I don't even know what it's called, series or question or segment. There we go. I knew it started with an S. It's 12:42. It's called Who's Next? Now, I don't agree with every single one of these, but I want you to give me an answer on one of them. You, gun to your head, you have to pick one of these guys. You can't, or one of these options. You can't, be like, oh, back out. I don't want to pick either of them. They're both going to be there. Or they're both not going to be. Who's Next is a segment of, I'm going to give you one guy from each team, or from the team, and you have to pick who's going to be there next year and who's going to be traded. So we'll start with the Nuggets. Again, I don't even think either of these guys will be gone. However, I'm putting it out to you. Who's next to be traded? Who's next to be moved? Jamal Murray or MPJ? If the Nuggets had to move one of those guys, which one are you moving? Siavash, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm going to go first. But I think that's an easy answer. I'm going to go ahead with MPJ.
Okay. Is it the
I think
injury
the
issues?
injury stuff,
Yep.
yeah, for sure. I think the injury stuff is definitely an issue. The contract is also definitely hefty for this, considering the injuries. So if they can get away from one of those guys, I think MPJ will be first.
Mm-hmm. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, totally agree with C there. I definitely could not see them moving away from, their star point guard Jamal Murray, because essentially the team is built around Jamal and Jokic. Yeah. MPJ was just like a nice accessory
for sure
to that squad. So yeah, if they got to ship one, it's gonna be MPJ
for sure. Now I should say these all there's 8 There's 8 teams here. They're all teams that were eliminated in the first round. So we just started in the West. I'm gonna go over the East. I'm gonna go to the Atlanta Hawks. No, I'm not putting Trae Young in there. That is their cornerstone piece, even though he shot 8% in the first game. Collins or Capella? Chris, you gotta move one of them. Are you moving John Collins or are you moving Clint Capella?
Oof.
It's tough, right?
That's tough.
Both kind of have had rumors this year about moving, and could be assets somewhere else.
I would probably say I'm gonna move Clint. I'm gonna move Capella.
Clint Capella. Okay. Now I think I would agree with you on that. But I want to hear why.
I just looking at both players, and then again looking at like the seasons they've had. What? Who is it? Clint's slightly older, I think. Um, I don't know, man. Like,
Yeah,
I just think Clint Capella is just not as productive.
sure.
That's all. That's just for me as John Collins, and I think they could easily fill that void, even if they went like a small ball and didn't have as big of a center as Clint. I think they could still do fairly well without.
Well, and they could fit that theme of small ball and still have that center in Oneka Okongwu. What a tongue twister there. Former USC Trojan. I'm a big fan of his as well. Even though he's a 6'9" center, you know my opinions on undersized centers. I don't like them.
Love him.
But he's a great. I'm not comparing him to that, but just in terms of his size and his abilities, kind of similar to Robert Williams in Boston. 6'9" center, good rebounder, good on defense. Siavash, I propose the same question to you. Collins or Capella? Who are you moving?
I think the easiest answer would be Capella, but at the same time, Capella is a top 10 center in the league right now.
Oh, interesting.
The list isn't as enticing
You're
as like, when you look at power forwards, though. Because like power forwards, they can come up with different options, and then Collins might be a top 15 or 20 guy, whereas Capella isn't that higher end. But I think still you would go with Capella because his role can be replaceable with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Collins, you got to find yourself somebody who has his size, pause, and his shooting in that situation.
Yeah. Okay, sticking with you, Siavash, moving back over to the West. You know, one guy is your favorite, probably your favorite player in the league. The other guy we've talked about, and we mentioned his inconsistency so far in the playoffs. My opinion is he thinks he's the best player on the team, and he's not the best player on the team. Karl-Anthony Towns or D'Angelo Russell? Who are you getting rid of? Again, some of these are really easy options. Yeah. But, I mean...
Easy.
No, I mean, I spoke about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about Minnesota's loss in that series. I think D'Lo has to be looked at as if he can beat it. Next point guard next to Ant and Cat moving forward. Of course, him and Cat are boys, but at some point, if you're the GM, you got to look around. Exactly. You got, I mean, I was thinking about DeMar and Kyle Lowry the other day and how much their friendship was impactful for that team, but once they were able to make that move, they were able to take that next step and go win a championship. I'm not going to say the same for Timberwolves, but I think if you got a guy like Ant, who is such a big cornerstone for the future, you might want to surround him with somebody else that can help him develop.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, like I said, kind of jokingly, but kind of serious, D'Lo sometimes acts like he's the best player on the team. I saw that a lot in the playoffs, kind of playing hero ball per se. I saw that with Ja in Game 1 against the Golden State Warriors. It's just, I think it's maybe just the youth and the inexperience, trying to play hero ball, taking everything on his shoulders at the end of the game. I get it, you're the guy, but D'Lo is not Ja. You know what I mean? So I agree. It would be D'Lo, but Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
No, again, fairly easy answer. I'm gonna move D'Lo. Yes, as like both players can be fairly inconsistent, but again, during this entire series when things did matter, D'Lo was the quieter of the two players, between Cat and himself. And again, the list of really good centers isn't like terribly long as well. And Cat is on that list. So to move away from kind of that to keep somebody else who's, you are a point guard, whatever, they could probably even make do with Pat Bev for the time.
Yeah.
Type of thing, and just go with his veteran leadership. So
you could run like Pat Bev, Beasley, Ant, Vanderbilt, and Cat there. Okay, so we'll go back over to the East, and I'll start with you on this one, Chris. Now remember, you got to pick one. And I could have picked two players here, but because of recent rumors, and as Rudy Gobert has recently said, there's a new rumor every day, doesn't mean they're real. And Masai laughed this off. Nick kind of laughed this off as well. But who's next? Who if one had to go next season, if one was gone next season, is it Fred or is it Nick Nurse?
Fred or Nick Nurse?
Yeah.
Damn.
I was gonna pick Pascal, but like again, just because of the Nick news that has come up as of late, I figured
got shut down.
No, I know, but
Wasn't even news.
that's what I'm saying. A new rumor every day doesn't mean it's an actual truth rumor.
Yeah. Well, I think like if you had to get rid of one of them, like I guess it would be Fred then. Like they're not gonna give up like Nick Nurse as a coach. And it does suck because like as much I think even DeMar said this in like an interview about why he wouldn't come back to the Raptors kind of thing, because it wouldn't feel like his team. Like that team is now
interesting. I didn't see
Fred's and Pascal's now. Like that's their team, and the only way he would come back again if like Lowry was there, then it again would feel like his team again. But it would suck to break up that dynamic. But I think it would hurt like way more to lose like a coach like Nick Nurse.
Sivash?
Yeah, everything I agree with Chris. You do not want to lose a guy like Nick Nurse, and as you mentioned in the last part, point guards are easier to grab than a good coach. So,
like,
and again, go ahead.
Got so many point guards too. Like you've got a point guard in like Malachi Flynn that you're working on.
Wow.
You know, if the guy studies up his game, you've got a point guard in Delano Banton who's like a 7-foot point guard, like a fucking freak. Bro.
You know my opinion. Again, I had nothing against him. It's just so clunky out there. It's like his legs are too small and his shoes are like too big. It's like something needs to be fixed.
Yeah, like watch it up too. Like he always looks like he's hunched because he's like, he's probably gotta be like.
It's just like he's out there, just playing.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what I think of every time I see him. I'm like, this is like a Scarborough playing for the Raptors.
Pretty much.
Okay, we'll go back to back with Chris here, going back over to the West. We'll go with Zion. Or a playoff appearance. I couldn't think of another New Orleans Pelicans player. So Zion or a playoff appearance, what is going to be traded next year, per se?
Like, how far are we going? Like a playoff like they did?
A playoff appearance. Finals? A playoff appearance.
Just make it to go into the playoff.
Yeah, we've talked, about them potentially being a top 4 pick. Or top 4 seed.
I'm going to say Zion. I'm going to say trade away the playoff pick because... I'm going to keep Zion because we've already seen without Zion, the team is already able to make the playoffs and, again, arguably perform very well. It might have been a different story if they weren't playing the number 1 seeded Suns, obviously.
Yeah.
But, just adding Zion again, it's just, like I said, going to add this defensive pressure and these other offensive options. So I'm keeping Zion. Trading away that playoff.
Yeah. Sivash? Are you in agreements with that?
I'm in agreements with Chris. I'm gonna go back to an old saying that still sticking around, even though the team is not really doing this process, is the trust the process Sixers. They gave away their chance at the playoffs to be able to have a better team in years to come, and of course they got a guy like Joel who developed into an MVP level player. And we have seen situations like we mentioned before, Minnesota in 2017, going all out to make the playoffs, but then they didn't go far and they had a bad team for years to come. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with Chris. I think I would give away the playoffs appearance just to have Zion. And we're just going to keep it at that. I'm not going to go into like, what if Zion this, what if Zion that.
Yeah.
Just going to keep it at that chance of having a superstar on my team.
For sure. I totally agree. Okay, so I just did back-to-back for Chris. Now I'm going to do back-to-back for Sivash. Sivash, we've been waiting.
I know why you did that.
We've been waiting on your team here. Levine or Vooch? Levine or Vooch?
Vooch.
Yeah. I want to hear it.
Vooch,
I want to hear it.
You want to hear what, man? Like, listen, it's been a rough last week in the NBA Twitter and, in the NBA talks where Levine gave an exit interview saying, I love Chicago. It's been a great experience.
A lot of past tense.
I don't like that.
A lot of past tense.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Then DeJounte Murray posting a Photoshop picture of him in San Antonio.
Interesting, because I didn't know what it was. I saw a tweet, and then I saw someone quote tweet it, be like, yo, this is crazy, from DeJounte Murray. But the tweet was removed. But maybe. The tweet was removed. I was like, I wonder what it was. So there you go. Thank you for.
Yeah, I think it was king of the fourth quarter. Kenny, that was like, yo, this is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it's looking crazy out there right now. I don't want to talk about it. My emotions are so shaking about this subject. But if I had to give up anybody, I'm going to cut off Vooch first.
I think that would be, if you were given any player on the Bulls, you would probably get rid of Vooch first.
Mm-hmm.
A few more names.
Okay.
Probably Tristan Thompson's at the top of the list.
Fair enough. I gave you that lob because I know Levine's your guy, and I just wanted you to, to talk about him. And I totally agree. But Chris, I'll let you speak on that as well. Just Levine or Vooch. If you got to get rid of one next season, who is it?
I guess honestly, man, I'm gonna get rid of Levine. We're just gonna have Kobe White step up, and
I knew it.
Just kidding. I agree with I would be getting rid of Vooch too.
Now I have a question.
Vooch
Sorry,
to be a top 10 center.
That's where I was about to go. Would Vooch?
I was gonna say.
Would Vooch be a top 10 center? If we're talking Capella being a top 10 center, is Vooch in that list as well? Because, like you had mentioned, it's easier. It's harder to get a top 10 center maybe than it is a shooting guard. I was like, fuck.
Jokic, Joel, Gobert, Cat, Aiden, Vooch. Who else we got? I think Vooch is a top 10 center, or at least near that.
Valanciunas,
but I think no.
That might be on the edge.
Yeah.
I mean, some people ranked Vooch as 6th, looking at him. So I guess,
Yeah, he would be top 10 for sure. But even with that, I think you would rather
Well, we know where Levine
have a
sits.
guy like Levine.
Top 3 shooting guards. And he's not 3 or 2.
No, Booker's still balling.
Yeah, no, I know. I feel you. Just throwing that back to an early episode of the Lob It Up podcast this season. Okay, staying in the East, and again, staying with your guy. We talked about him a bit. We talked about both these guys a bit. Kyrie or Ben? I'll start with you, Siavash. The Brooklyn Nets got to move one of them at the start of the season. Both can, they can make their arguments. Kyrie or Ben, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, what are you doing?
You would have to go with Ben, just off the logistics of Kevin Durant's happiness.
Sure.
Kevin Durant is a guy that is hard to keep happy, but in the past few years he has been happy because he's with his buddy Kyrie. Mm-hmm. So even if you can keep that guy happy, you got a top 3 player in the league with you. And again, Kyrie's not so bad. People want to always talk about how bad he is, but outside of the vaccine stuff, he's still a bucket. He's still, plays well. And if you can surround those guys with good pieces, you're not going to have an issue making it to the playoffs or making a deep run. Yeah,
also fuck all the, fake Twitter reporters that were like challenging Kyrie for smiling at the end of the series. He was smiling in the in the press conference or whatever. He was talking about how happy he was for his brothers in Boston, how they deserved it, they're next up. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, I get it. Like, we're used to the Kobe's and stuff, and I like that as well. But, like, Kobe also didn't play for any other team. Kyrie's played with those guys. He watched those guys grow up. And now, he played against them and he lost them. So, I think he's a little proud. So fuck everybody else for judging that. I want to get that off. But, Chris, go ahead. Kyrie or Ben?
I get rid of Kyrie.
Oh, wow.
I don't care about Katie's happiness. Nah.
Okay.
Your happiness this is a business. I'm not playing, Christian Mingle. I don't care.
Why of all the sites you pick Christian Mingle? Is it because I'm wearing a cross and it threw you?
It's the one that I always remember the commercials constantly. Or eHarmony.
Yeah,
it's not
Plenty
that.
of Fish.
Exactly. It's none of those. It's a business. So get you out of there, Kyrie, and we're gonna say this is perfect ideal Ben Simmons. Nothing going on between the years, and he is ready to play. So I'm assuming I'm getting.
I don't know if you can hear me or not.
You're a little
frozen.
We can hear you. But I can hear you. But I'm assuming I can get perfect Ben Simmons. I'm gonna keep Ben Simmons.
Yeah, but you got to consider the happiness of your players too.
Nah.
Like, I'm not saying this is Christian Mingle, but at the end of the day, you got to look at the guy like KD, who you can keep a top 3 player on your team.
Mm-hmm.
Guy, we can. So this guy's going boop beep beep.
Troubleshooting over there.
All right, and the final one. I'm gonna start with you, Chris. Going to the Utah Jazz. This is probably the most speculated one. Probably the one that's actually going to happen. A lot of these are, duds and fakes and just, here for banter. Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell, you're the Utah Jazz. What are you doing in the offseason?
I'm getting rid of Rudy Gobert.
Okay. Now, why?
I'm going to keep the team around Donovan Mitchell. Again, yes, Rudy Gobert has been a great defensive rim protector, but other than that, you take him out of the paint, his defense is lackluster at best. You give anybody who can dribble the ball slightly, and Rudy Gobert is on skates and can't guard the man.
Okay.
The
reason I wanted Chris to go first is because Sivash, you shared an interesting video into the group chat, and it was about Rudy Gobert. His impact, and I told you I was at the bachelor party, I think, when you sent it, and you said basically if the Jazz get rid of Rudy Gobert, I don't know if you said you don't know if they're even a play-in team or they might just be a play-in team. So I ask you, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, if you're the Utah Jazz, what are you doing? And then can you just further elaborate for people that are listening, for people that are watching, why you think that the Utah Jazz would be in that mediocre, era if they get rid of Rudy?
The question you're asking, of course, as you mentioned before, we can't just say no.
Yeah.
We can't just say neither.
Yeah.
If I had to choose, if there was the rumor did go out, Rudy had said it's either me or him. And in my mind, all I thought about that rumor was that's an easy way for him to go trade me without saying trade me.
Exactly. He looks good to the organization, to the fans, without actually looking back.
Exactly. Any sane person would keep Donovan Mitchell on that team because of his impact as a playmaker and as a scorer. Of course, Rudy Gobert is a top 3 center, and that's where if I had the choice, I would not do anything. I would not trade either of them.
You got to pick one. You can't slime out.
I did pick. I'm going with Rudy if I had to make that decision. Okay. Now, going back to our conversation where I sent you guys our video, shout out to Thinking Basketball. It's a great YouTube page for anybody that loves basketball. Should go on, check them out. They do a great breakdown. And that breakdown of how the Dallas Mavericks playoffs, as well as a few years ago, over the years, how they've been losing in this playoff series, is a great breakdown because of not just Rudy, but everybody else on that team. I said if you take out Rudy from that defense, they're going to be a playing team. I still stand by that.
Okay.
Because Chris mentioned that if you take Rudy out the paint, anybody that can dribble a little can get by him. I think he can make the case with anybody else on that Jazz roster as well. I don't think they got a defensive player, and their defensive strategy all year has been get these guys into the paint so Rudy can stop. And then you put a shooter on the team and Rudy cannot be in the paint. These are just easy drive-bys. And if Rudy tries to get in the paint, that's an easy open shot. And these guys are not doing the rotation they should be doing.
Yeah.
So I think the problem is bigger than Rudy.
I agree with a lot of that. But surely I'm choosing Rudy honestly based on his contract. His contract is not the greatest. I think it's still 4 years, $35+ million, I think. It's a pretty heavy contract. Again, you have youth in Donovan Mitchell. I think Rudy's still 30 years or just under 30 years. So it's not like he's an old guy. But again, I haven't always been the biggest Rudy fan. You put me more on an appreciation, I guess I would say, more than a fanship, but an appreciation for Rudy Gobert this year, Siavash. But again, I still see him as a very one-dimensional player that really only affects, a portion of the court. And that's the defensive zone and the paint in the defensive zone. We've seen him be out by the 3 and just get cooked. So, there's things I think that Donovan Mitchell needs to work on. I've been very vocal about that. But you're going to take youth. You're going to take youth and potential when you're put up against that situation. And I totally agree. I think you're Rudy coming out, whether that was, he tweeted out saying there's a new rumor every day, blah, blah, blah. Whether it was real or not, I think that's the decision that they make. Okay.
No, I agree.
That's about all I have. That's about all the bandwidth that my eyes have. And we've been recording for about an hour and 30 minutes, almost as long as the New York Rangers and Pittsburgh Penguins played tonight. I said Miami Bucks about 8 times today. That's not even a real franchise. So this is another expansion team. This is another episode of Lob It Up After Dark, watching the Golden State Warriors and Memphis Grizzlies game live. We missed a bit of it, but definitely interesting. But we will catch you in the next one. We'll talk about more of the second round, see what's going on, and look forward to more of the off-season antics as they may happen quickly very soon, I think. So we'll catch you next one. Peace.
Deuces.